Well, welcome to another edition of Minnesota Powersports with Boomerang Marine and Sports. I am John, and we are joined here, as you can see, by Jake Dreyer. He is our service manager at our Alexandria location because today we're talking about how to maintain that new purchase of the ATV, UTV world. And hi, Jake. How you doing, man?
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing great. This is something that is not a topic that is foreign to you. Obviously, as a service manager, you're gonna tackle this a lot. But this is something that you go through with each person that buys a UTV or ATV in your store. Is that right?
Yeah, it's part of our sales process. After they sign the papers and finish up, they come and visit me, and we talk about general maintenance, general use of the machine, as well as kind of what to expect for a service regimen.
Well, let's talk about what we need to do when we first make that big purchase. It is a big purchase. No matter what you spend, it's a lot of money, but you're banking on a lot of fun. And in order to keep that fun going, you do have to maintain proper maintenance on this thing. And so let's talk about that break-in cycle. And you talk about the fact that that first 25 hours is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So CF Moto and Polaris are very similar as far as the initial service. The 20 to 25 hour mark is kind of your break-in oil change. That's where you're gonna take it easy on the machine for that first 25 hours. Enjoy it, break it in slow, but it is a new machine. Everything needs to get seated and comfortable with running and being a new motor. So at that 25-hour mark. And it is clocked on hours, not on miles like your vehicle. So with the hours, they want that 25-hour mark for Polaris, 20 hours for CF Moto. We get it in, we do a full check over front to back, we change the engine oil and any manufacturer recommended maintenance that's required at that break-in period.
Um, we're talking about choosing the right gear too. So that's really important. And when you're taking these things out, you want to be in the right gear. And what is that? How do we determine that?
So your machines are basically driven on a snowmobile clutch, and they have a low and a high option. Essentially, if you're doing anything less than 15 miles an hour, running down to check the mail, putting around the yard, you want to maintain that low gear. If you do intend on going over that 15 mile an hour mark, you want to come to a complete stop, put the vehicle in high, and then go ahead full throttle. The problem you'll run into is a lot of people want that high gear. So they put it in high gear and then they put around the yard. That causes premature wear to the belts and the clutching system. And to be completely honest with you, if there is premature wear on clutching and belts, these engineers and Polaris technicians, they know that it wasn't properly used. And a lot of time that will affect any warranty claim on the clutch or belt system. So really maintaining and using that belt or using that right gear is going to not only give you the longevity and the proper break-in of the belt and clutch system, but if there is an issue, it'll be more likely covered in the event you're using it properly.
Let's get back to something you were talking about before. In fact, that these are monitored by clock hours and not by miles. That might be a new concept, especially to somebody that is new to this world and new to this kind of purchase. So tell us more about that and the kind of things you have to know in relationship to that. And when you talk about, we know how many miles is a lot of miles on something. What's a lot of clock hours on something?
The clock hours, in my opinion, is a little bit skewed. And here's why: because you have different type of users using these machines. You have the guy that likes to go ice fishing and lets his machine idle while he's fishing. So his engine hours are going to be a lot higher than his miles, where you have other users that tend to drive the machine, shut it off when they get where they're going, start it back up, drive the machine. So the hours and the miles are actually closer together. So as far as running your engine hours, it's typically not ideal to let these things sit and idle for hours on end, and that will cause a variation in how many miles compared to how many hours you have. So Definitely keeping an eye on the idle time. It's okay to let it idle for a couple minutes here and there, but this extended idle really drives your hour mark way up when your miles are still relatively low. As far as engine hours, I wouldn't say there's really a rule of thumb of what is high and what is low. Power sports are not cars, so when you start getting towards that 10,000 miles, 4,500, 5,000 hours, you're getting that's would be considered a higher mileage machine.
And I know these things are built for all different occasions and all kinds of weather, but is there anything regarding the weather or the type of usage that you give it that you need to kind of give other considerations for depending on how you're using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest concerns I see is cold start issues with a brand new machine. And we've all been raised, if it's a machine or something we care about, right? We put 91 octane. We run the best fuel we can possibly run through these things. Polaris has actually sent out a tech bulletin that we want 87 octane in these machines in the winter. So I grew up running 91 in anything I cared about, but in the cold temperatures. So what I've been saying is a rule of thumb, if it's going to be below 40 degrees, let's go ahead and run that 87 octane. If you do any sitting, the biggest problem we see with 87 octane is it's just not a high quality fuel. So if it sits for any amount of time, you do get some up issues, some fuel injector clogs or carburetor clogs, depending on what type of machine you have. But one of the biggest things is if it's going to sit more than 20 days without use, go ahead and dump a fuel stabilizer in that 87, keep it happy, and then you shouldn't have any issues. But yeah, pretty much 87 octane in the winter. You can run 91 in the summer just fine, but below 40 degrees, you will have cold start issues, CF Moto and Polaris, if you're running 91 octane in the cold temperatures.
And not to say you're not a great guy to get to know, but you don't want to get to know Jake too much because that means you're in the shop a little too much. Well, let's talk about what does happen if you're not adhering to some of these things you're talking about.
So you'll definitely, batteries tend to have issues in the cold. And if a battery freezes, at that point, it's pretty much a bad battery. Running the battery down, trying to start a machine in the cold that doesn't want to start because it's got the wrong fuel, could potentially turn into a replacement battery. And batteries are, on average $200 nowadays, plus a half an hour to put in. So, I mean, you're going to spend almost $300 on a preventable situation by using the right fuel. The other aspect of the cold starts and stuff is let the machine run for 5 minutes. A lot of them have a temperature gauge on them. Let them get up to operating temp. You should be doing that with your vehicle, but that's probably a different chat on a different channel. But cold starting motors and taking off cold, the metal hasn't expanded, the oil hasn't made it to all the areas it needs to. So potentially running a cold engine is could be catastrophic to the internals. So let your machine warm up, let it get up to operating temperature, let it sit for a couple minutes and idle. And again, most of them have a gauge so you can tell what temperature you're at before you go.
All right, Jake, thanks so much, man. We appreciate it. Got to get back to work, huh?
Yeah, it's time to service some machines.
That's right. And he is Jake Dreher. He joins us from our Alexandria store. He's our service manager there. And as you can see, very, very knowledgeable. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
All right, this has been an edition of Minnesota Power Sports. We hope that you join us and give us some ideas. We want to know what you think, what we should tackle, what is interesting to you. And of course, if you haven't visited our stores in Alexandria and Melrose, you can certainly do that. We've got everything under the sun, whether it is snow falling, which we haven't had a lot of this particular winter, or if the water's looking fantastic and ready to get out on. We can help you at Boomerang Marine and Sports. Thanks for joining us.